Hello, everyone, and welcome to Webinar Wednesday. Again, it's Webinar Wednesday, and we are so happy to have you here. Now, for those who are not able to register and join us on Webinar Wednesday, we are actually live on Facebook. So today is Webinar Wednesday, and what we're going to learn is how to run a successful nonprofit. And we've got a subject matter expert, Dr. Rolle. She's an amazing, very experienced with great vision. You're going to walk away with a lot of capabilities today. I have no doubt. But before we get started, I wanted to get started. I wanted to inform you about Buy Local, Grow SA. Now, it's a one-stop website of resources for small businesses. Now, Buy Local is a platform designed for business owners like yourself. Now, through the website, you're going to be able to access free resources ranging from procurement opportunities to promoting your business and increase visibility for free. You heard that right, it's for free. Now, we have some new enhancements and features such as having the ability to post business promotions to your profile. So if you have a sale or you're introducing a new product, you can use Buy Local, Grow SA as another avenue to advertise your service or products. Now, we also added procurement opportunities where you can save the ones that you're interested, along with the ability to post contracts and opportunities of your own as well. It takes about 5, maybe the max 15 minutes to register, but once you're approved, you can literally unlock a new way of doing business here in San Antonio. And again, it's always a pleasure having you here. But you know, all of this is possible through what, Sabrina? We want to say thank you. We want to say thank you to our sponsors who make this possible. HEB, the City of San Antonio, the Economic Development Department, Wells Fargo, and of course, all of our supporters who believe in our mission to provide resources for our small businesses. But you're not here to listen to me, Juanita from Tree Shaker Podcast. You're here to learn from the subject matter expert, Dr. Rolle. She's a PhD, absolutely. Now, she's the founder and CEO of Rolle and Associates, LLC. And as you can see, you are able to connect with her, and she is amazing, amazing. Now, Dr. Rolle is a PhD, and she's had several positions in academic, business, government, and nonprofit areas. And she is the founder and CEO of Rolle and Associates, LLC. She's a strategic leadership consulting and training firm. Her skill sets include nonprofit management, leadership development, executive and transitioning coaching, strategic planning, board development, group facilitation, and change management. And I am so ready for that. Now, she is an expert in diversity, equity, and inclusion, and has been an adjunct professor in the Industrial Organization Psychology program at St. Mary's University and the African American Studies program at the University of Texas here in San Antonio. Now, currently, she teaches and consults on diversity, equity, and inclusion for a variety of organizations, including the Executive Education Program at UTSA for Professional Excellence. Now, she is the author of Martyrs for the Movement, Black Bodies, Civil Rights, and hashtag Black Lives Matter, published in 2020. Now, we are so honored to have you, Dr. Rolle, and being able to share with us your insight. Welcome.
Well, thank you so much. I am so excited to be a part of this event today, and nonprofits are very close to my heart. And so I could talk about this all day. So I don't want to waste another moment talking about myself. I almost wanted to tell you to please stop the intro. My name is enough. So yes. I am ready to go whenever you are.
We are ready. Help us grow, help us be better. And definitely all those who are here, you're going to learn some amazing skills today.
Absolutely. Well, good morning, everyone. If you're on Central Standard Time, it's still morning. And I guess Pacific Standard Time is, Pacific Standard Time as well. Welcome. We are going to talk about how to run a successful nonprofit. And so the objectives of this workshop, and we'll go to the next slide now, are to give you a brief overview of some of the key requirements to run a successful nonprofit in today's reality. And so what I mean by that is today's reality. Things for nonprofits have changed from what they were just 12 months ago. Things are totally different, and we all know because of COVID, but even if COVID had not happened, nonprofit reality changes for a variety of reasons. It could be something in the economy, it could be political will, all kinds of things. So let's go to the first thing that I want to share with you. The very first thing that nonprofits are to be concerned with is to be focused on their mission. A nonprofit's mission should drive every aspect of its existence. The mission should drive all of your decision-making. For example, when we talk about the nonprofit should drive every aspect of your existence, it should be used for decision-making. So for example, if you're thinking about starting a new program or taking on some funding that may be available, you have to think about, does this fit our mission? And you should be able to ask a simple question of, will this decision enhance our mission or will it hurt our mission? And I like to say that all money is not good money. So you have to think about, should we really take this opportunity to take this money? It's not always a good idea to do that because and I don't have enough time to get into this today, but look up the term mission creep, C-R-E-E-P. And what that is that sometimes organizations will take on projects or programs that are close to what they were created to do as an organization, but not exactly. But because the funding is there, they will begin to take on these other projects. The other thing is that being focused on your mission, of course, is key to funding the nonprofit. So it will determine where you will go to ask for money, especially with private foundations who are very mission driven and very focused on where they will fund and what they will fund. Now, it would also help you determine what programs, as I've mentioned before. And I finally want to say that your mission is your friend. It will keep you on the straight and narrow, but more importantly, it tells others about your nonprofit and what you're all about. We can go to the next slide. The next thing, number 2, is you must have an engaged board of directors. What I mean by that is that when board members are truly engaged, they understand the importance of their role and they show up. They know and understand that they are responsible for governing the organization, meaning that they hold an even greater responsibility than the hired executive director. So in other words, they don't miss board meetings because they know that their presence is important. If there are people who are on the fence about, well, I can just miss this meeting because they don't really need me, that board member may need to check themselves. And I'm saying this not only for those of you out there who may be nonprofit founders, or you're an executive director, or you have some leadership organization in a nonprofit, but also for those of you who serve on boards. Think about your position and what you do there. You are important and vital. The other thing is that they give their time, talent, and treasure. In other words, treasure is money. So not only do they bring their talent, which is, for example, if I'm asked to be on a board, usually people are interested in having me on the board for a couple of reasons. One is I do know a lot about nonprofit organizations. I do know a lot about leadership and a couple of other things. So that's my talent. I can do that. And of course, my time, we all have the same 24 hours in a day, but your treasure, that's when we're talking about your money. Board members should be willing to give their personal financial contribution. And so if that's the first time you've heard of that, I want to tell you a little bit about, there's another kind of term that goes around, and it is give, G-I-V-E, get, G-E-T, or get off. And what that means is that you're giving your own financial contribution, whatever that might be. And then the get part of it is if I can't give, for example, some boards require that all board members give a substantial amount of money, like $10,000 a year. So if you're not in a position to give that much money, then they might say, well, you don't have to give it out of your pocket, get it from your corporation or get it some other kind of way to the nonprofit. And that get off means that if you can't give, you can't get it, then we'd like for you to get off and make room for someone else. Now, I know that seems harsh, and I know that there's some nonprofits that have board members who do bring great value to the organization who are not able to do either of those. They don't have the personal funds, they're not connected in any way with the corporation that would give them that much money. And whatever it may be, I just used 10,000 as an example. I know some nonprofits, they only ask their board members for $100 or $200 a year. But still, for some organizations and some board members, that might be a stretch to ask them to do that. The thing to remember is that a lot of private foundations that you may go to for funding, they ask the question, what percentage of your board members have made a personal financial contribution? And they don't usually ask how much, but what they want to know is that all of the board members are fully vested in the success of your nonprofit. And that means that they're giving of their treasure as well. So in order for your nonprofit to be successful, your board members must be passionate about the mission. They are so passionate that they also they attract potential board members. And they understand that their duty is also to help identify potential board members who might be good, who bring value to that organization. Identifying and attracting potential board members is one of the most difficult things that most boards have some issue trying to do. And the other thing that board members must do is they must operate as a team. They speak with one voice. And so what I mean by that is that once a decision has been made, the face that they put out to the public is one. They're operating as a unit. One of the best ways to destroy a nonprofit from within is to have board members who are in conflict or who are in some kind of strife with one another. And we certainly want to, one of the main purposes of having a board is not that everybody is a yes man or woman. You do want to have these real meaningful and deep conversations where somebody plays the angel or the devil's advocate who can bring in other perspectives. But once decisions have been made, they speak as one. And then finally, successful boards or successful nonprofits seek continuous improvement on the board. And so what I mean by continuous improvement, we'll go to the next slide, is that they seek in terms of board development. So one of the things that, and when I talk about board development, what I mean by that is the board developments helps you understand your board, your role on the board, about what you should be doing. Your board development also provides education about what their roles and responsibilities are. I know of some boards where I have been contracted to go in to talk specifically about board roles and responsibilities, but I've also been on boards where someone from maybe the staff, the executive director, or someone from within that industry, and by industry, I mean, if your nonprofit is education driven, or if it may be in the healthcare industry, you bring in someone who can talk about what is going on in healthcare. For example, I have one client that is an HIV, AIDS, education, and service related organization. They bring in people from the CDC who can talk about new drugs that are coming on the market. They bring in people who can talk about homelessness and how they can help provide services so that people who are who have the virus will not become homeless, or if they are homeless. They have people who can come in and talk about social and economic factors in their community that might affect their nonprofit. So one of the things that I wanted to mention, if you're on a board, you should be asking questions like, or you should have your board to think about a crisis management plan. So for example, before March of this year, when COVID broke out, there were lots of nonprofits that were forced to stop operations. But those who had some kind of crisis management plan or a crisis communication plan, they didn't have to stop their operations. Why? Because their board had already engaged in role play and asking questions about what if? What if something happened and we cannot operate? How can we still serve our clients? How can we still produce our programs? I'm also thinking about Maestro right now. I'm sure if COVID had not happened, I would be at your location, probably live and in person, doing this workshop. But you were able to pivot and say, okay, there's this thing called Zoom. There are other platforms to do webinars on, but you shifted and you pivoted so that you're still able to provide this service for people. So being able to continually improve with board development is one of the ways that nonprofits remain successful. So when I talk about crisis management, it's not just about public relations. It asks the deeper questions about what if something happens to affect our organization. Every board should conduct a board assessment. And that's a part of board development. Board assessment is a tool designed to provide information and insight to your board's governance performance. So, for example, it could tell you if you have board members who could be doing more than what you're asking them to do. So when I do a board assessment for organizations, that is one of the questions that I ask. Could you be doing more for your nonprofit than what you're being asked? And you'd be surprised how many people say yes. But by the same token, when I ask that question, there are people who say, or if I ask the question about, would you like to leave before your term is over? And some will say, yes, they do. And this is a legitimate question that people should not be made to feel shameful about if they say that they want to get off before their term is over. So the thing about that is that sometimes people's lives and their priorities change, but it provides a way for board members to leave that space for other people who are right there in it at this point. Now, another thing you might want to do is to have an organizational assessment. That provides insight into every aspect of your organization. It will especially identify your strengths and your weaknesses, and that helps you understand where your opportunities and your threats may be so that you can address those before they affect the organization. Now, you may have questions, and so you can go ahead and put that in the chat. I'm going to stop at some point and answer questions. Juanita will let me know when there's a really question that I need to answer right now. But otherwise, I'll save some time at the end. Okay, I'm going to go to the next slide now. And I'm going to talk about successful nonprofits are agile. So when a nonprofit is agile, it means that it is quick in responding to changes in the environment. And I am on the next slide on agile. So whenever they're able to make quick changes based on things that are happening in the environment, its staff is able to work on tasks that maximizes their skills and their expertise. So for example, when a nonprofit is agile, that means they don't wait for the worst thing to happen before changing. They look at themselves, again, that organizational assessment that I mentioned, they are able to assess, again, like I said, when you do your SWOT, your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, they're able to look at where they're weak and say, okay, we've got to fix this so that we can handle changes that may come. But then also, they're looking at threats that may happen. And sometimes there are threats that you can't do anything about, but you have to be able to change and to pivot so that it doesn't take you down as an organization. When an organization is agile, it means that change is anticipated, is almost welcomed, and that staff are also not tied to their titles. So just because I am a program manager, it doesn't mean that I can't do something else, because I might have skills that are valuable to the organization in another area. And this is especially true in planning. Sometimes we overlook people who may be a little bit lower on the totem pole, but they may have ideas and they're seeing things from a different perspective. So everybody's ideas are valuable and welcome when there is an agile organization. The next thing, diverse funding sources. So successful organizations do not depend on one primary funding source. That's danger. That's you're almost asking for trouble. And now if someone's out there and they're saying, well, we got started because we got this one grant and this is all we have. And that's fine as a startup. One of the things I would like for you to write down to study is the life cycle of nonprofit organizations. The life, L-I-F-E, cycle. Just like businesses have life cycles, nonprofits do. There is the startup phase, then there's the growing phase, and then there is a tapering off phase. So a lot of times when you're in the beginning infancy stage, you only have one source of funding. And that's fine, but you can't stay in that infancy stage. Successful nonprofits have multiple streams of funding. And I know somebody is out there saying, well, Dorinda, Dr. Rolle, tell us, how do we get this funding? That's another webinar altogether. But having one funding source is common for startups, but you must plan on what you're going to do when that funding ends. And go to the next slide, because we're talking about diverse funding sources now. But a lot of times, funders will give you startup funding contingent on your sustainability plan. Okay, Dr. Rolle, what's a sustainability plan? Meaning that that funder may not give you money if you cannot show what you will do to continue your program when their funding runs out. So they want to see that, okay, you've thought through, when this little $100,000 or whatever you might get, when that's over, can you continue that program? Funders are not in the business of starting things that die after 1 year. They want to see it continue. So as a nonprofit leader, you must continually be on your grind for more funds. I do a lot of work with people starting nonprofits, and I keep telling them, it'll be the easiest thing that you're going to do is to run your programs, because that's your heart, that's your passion. But you're going to spend 80% of your time looking for funding, managing funding, or somehow figuring out how to get it. Funding is always going to be at the center of what you're doing. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. All successful nonprofits have an online presence. And so if you click next, the very first thing that you have to do is to have a website. You must, at a minimum, have a website or web page. You could just have one page that states the name of your nonprofit, your logo, your mission statement, and a donation button if you have your 501c3. The next thing, if there is no website, you can easily put up a Facebook page until you're able to secure a professional website. I know lots of nonprofits that's all they have is that Facebook page. And then depending on the demographic of your nonprofit, Instagram, YouTube, also TikTok may even be beneficial for you. So you must consider what you're trying to do with these social media sites. For example, Instagram might be good because you could potentially get donations there. YouTube may work for you if you've got some content where you're teaching people something or giving them valuable information. TikTok may not bring donations. You don't have enough time to train on TikTok. However, if you're an organization that is trying to stop, let's say something like the spread of HIV, for example, then those sites might be perfect to inform young people, or not only young people, but your demographic, about free testing and education. And I only say young people because TikTok is primarily a youth-driven site. Yeah, it's mostly young people on that. But TikTok, like everything else, changes. You know, Facebook used to be the hip thing for everybody, for young people, but now it seems like, you know, it's an old person site. You know, you got your grandma that's on Facebook now. Now, the next slide is about partnerships and collaborations. You need them. Don't fall victim to the Lone Ranger syndrome. So the Lone Ranger syndrome is the belief that my nonprofit, and especially if you're a founder in that nonprofit, that you have to do everything yourself. And you think, well, we don't really need anybody else because they don't do it like we do. We do it better than everybody. We're faster, we're quicker, we're better. But the reality is that every Lone Ranger also needs a Tonto. And in fact, you may need several Tontos. Every nonprofit should have partners and collaborators for every program or service that you run, no matter what it is. Okay, where do I get those? You're probably asking. If you look at what we saw when this webinar first started, where they listed their sponsors, those sponsors are what could be called partners. Those sponsors, without those sponsors, this program or this organization probably would have a difficult time getting up to speed and offering what it does. When you have, and I'm going to go to the next slide for this one. So when you have partners and collaborators, go back one to the value of partners and collaborators. There we go. So they obviously bring resources, and by resources, sometimes we mean money. It could be volunteers. It could even be space, like office space to run your program. It could be space to store equipment that you may have. In other words, it just brings a lot of resources to you. Partnerships and collaboration also gives you leverage. What do I mean by leverage? So remember the slide back when I was, or a couple of slides back when I was talking about funding, where some funders will only fund you if you can show that you can sustain that program. And sometimes they also want to know, okay, if we give you money for this program, who else is on board with you? Sometimes your partners and collaborators can come and they don't have to bring hard dollars to you, but they're bringing valuable resources that can be equated to dollars. So you can leverage your, let's say your resources who may be, let's just say, for example, HEB. I love them because HEB is, we used to have this thing where it says HEB means help everybody. And they do, they seem to try to help all nonprofits, no matter how small or large. But if nonprofits said, well, we'll give you an executive, which is the loaned executive program, we'll send somebody over who has accounting, who can serve on your board and maybe help you with your books and those kinds of things. So that's value. If you didn't have to pay somebody not to be on your board, but who could do your books for you, or who could put together a marketing campaign for you, that's dollars that you didn't have to spend. So now you can use that as leverage to go after other funding, because you can demonstrate that you have brought somebody like an HEB to the table. And like one of my bullets says there, it brings instant credibility to you when you're able to have certain partners and collaborators. That also brings knowledge to you. It increases your knowledge about how other nonprofits work, or even how other businesses work. And as I mentioned also, it gives you access to some expertise. And it can also close some of the gaps that you might have within your organization. Okay. So I'm also going to go to the next slide, where this is the last one, believe it or not. This is very important. Successful nonprofit leaders pay attention to self-care. Nonprofit leaders are subject to being overworked and underpaid. And for whatever reason, people, about the underpaid part of it, I find this very interesting that some people think that that is okay. Oh, they work for a nonprofit, so let's give them less money because nonprofits are not in the business of making money. But that doesn't mean that the people who work for that nonprofit don't have bills to pay just like you do. So in other words, they must take care of themselves. If they can't get more money, but at least you can unplug and not overwork yourself, because when you're gone, even though you're the founder of the organization, one of two things will happen. The organization will die because you failed to train other leaders because you felt like you needed to do everything yourself, or they'll just bring in somebody else while you're homesick in your bed. Somebody else will continue. If that nonprofit is of value to the community, your board and the rest of the community will figure out a way for it to continue. And so if your nonprofit is continuing, you need to be around to see that and not work yourself into an early grave or sickness. The one thing that an engaged board of directors will do is to make sure the executive director is taken care of with adequate time off, adequate time for professional development, just that time to unplug, to recharge. And I got my last slide here is on nonprofit resources. So Sabrina, if you could put that in the chat, if you could cut and paste that into the chat so that our participants will have, they'll have that to look, to click on later. What I wanted to show you there, that very first one, Charity Navigator. On that site, they give several different lists of successful nonprofits in various categories. So they can tell you what nonprofits are successful with their finances, what nonprofits have the best programs. And so if you're able to look at those that are on the list, see what you can glean from them that you might be able to incorporate into your nonprofit. That next one, GuideStar, that's an important one. GuideStar, I recommend that you put up a profile, a free profile for your nonprofit on GuideStar. GuideStar is used by a lot of funders if they want to learn about your nonprofit, especially if you're just getting up to speed, you don't really have your website yet. They will, you can put up your profile, and then they also have kind of a badge system. That's not the right word for it, but they will rate you based on the information you put on your website. Like if you list all of your board members and you list that you have board training, you also can upload your 990. Actually, even if you don't upload your 990, they will get your 990 from the IRS and it will be available for all the public to see. And that's how I learned a lot about nonprofits as well. So here's a little tip. You may see a nonprofit that is doing something similar or the same type of work that you do, and you're wondering, well, where do they get their funding? Or I wonder how much money they bring in with their donations. You can get all of that information from their 990 that is public information that is free on GuideStar. Now, remember I mentioned several slides back about a board assessment tool. So there is another organization called Board Source, one word, boardandsource.org. They're all about nonprofit boards. They don't talk about for-profit boards, except for they might have some publication that tells you the differences between the two or comparison, but they're all about nonprofits. It has a lot of information there that you can purchase. Some of it is for free. I believe there is some program where you can sign up to be on your mailing list, and they do send you lots of good information. However, the link that I have for you, that is a sample board assessment tool to give you an idea of the kinds of questions that are asked on a full assessment, and also the kinds of information, you know, what can I learn from these questions about your own board? And then that fourth one, donorbox.org, they give some characteristics of a successful nonprofit, which is what our title was about today. Some of the things on their list I do have, but I don't have everything that they have listed, just in the interest of time. but those are some good resources for you. There's also one more that I neglected to add. It is called Tech Soup. I am going to just put it in the chat here. So Tech Soup is a resource, if you're not familiar with them, where you can get software at a discount. You can also get equipment like laptops and things like that. For example, for your nonprofit, if you wanted to have, so you probably have a free Zoom account, but you're limited with the free Zoom account. But if you wanted to start having your own webinars or maybe even board meetings with your board members, and they are, they're in different places. And because of COVID, you don't want to try to bring everybody together. So with your free account, you're going to be limited to, I think, like 1 hour or less to have people on, but we all know meetings go longer than an hour. But what you may do with TechSoup, they have a program with Zoom where you can get a nonprofit account and you'll pay less. Like, I won't even tell you how much I have to pay for mine. And I know Maestro probably pays a lot for them to have a professional account, and then to have the webinars, that's even an additional cost. But you can reduce the cost for that if you buy it through TechSoup. And again, you have to register, you have to show them your 501c3 paperwork. You can also get things like your Microsoft Office products for like $39. I mean, come on, in your Adobe in Photoshop and stuff like that. You can get all that pretty cheaply. So I am going to stop talking now and turn this over to Juanita and let her tell me if there were any questions. And she may have some questions for me as well.
No, I did not want to interrupt you at all. This was phenomenal information. It's very beneficial. And as it said, you know, this information is very helpful by one of our observers, and thank you so much. Every day we learn something, and thank you for sharing. Great tools, great resources, Dr. Rolle. Now, one question I have is, and it's brought up by one of the participants, is benefit organization, ? What is that?
Okay, so now a benefit organization, if you go by the IRS definition, usually a benefit organization exists for, I hate to use the word to describe the word, but a benefit organization exists for the benefit of another organization. So for example, you could set up a nonprofit that does fundraising for another organization. So we raise all of our money and we give it over to the battered women and children's shelter. Almost like a foundation, except it doesn't have the same requirements that the same restrictions that a foundation would have.
Wonderful. I hope that answered your question, because I did not know that existed.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I have another question is, what do you think about Greatnonprofits.org?
So I believe that's a good one. I'm not real familiar with it. I know I've been there 1 or 2 times, but there are multiple organizations that have good information for nonprofits. And so if you peruse it and you see something that you like there, go ahead and take it and use it.
There you go. Now, what are some of the things that, you know, I know that you went through some of the material, and I did not want to interrupt you because I thought it was so important. I know sometimes, you know, when we're talking about leveraging those relationships, and leveraging doesn't necessarily mean monetary, correct, Dr. Rolle?
Right, absolutely, no. Yeah, leverage, especially relationships. I think there are all kinds of relationships. I talked about partnerships and collaborations, but just relationships one-on-one are very important. It's almost like, you know how we always talk about to find your next job is not necessarily going to be published on Indeed or wherever. But if you know somebody who knows somebody who can open the door for you, it happens that way in nonprofits a lot too. There's a nonprofit in town that had asked me to be on their board. If I said the name, you would know it, but I don't want to say it because I haven't gotten their permission specifically for this. But they asked me to be on their board, and I get that a lot. And so I said, no, I couldn't be on the board, but they shared with me in a workshop that they were expanding their reach outside of Bexar County, and they were serving lots and lots of places in the state of Texas, but they needed to move equipment from one place to the other. I said, oh, I know someone who owns a logistics company. And he's also contracting these big 18-wheelers to move things, and they ship things overseas. So anyway, I got them together. The next thing I know, this person is their board chair. The next thing I know, they were breaking ground in a multi-million-dollar new facility. And I was like, oh my gosh. And as a matter of fact, and I just talked to him like a week or so ago, and he was saying, it's been a wild ride. And I thank you for this, because he said, Dr. Rolle, you know everybody. I said, no, it was just that I happened to be in the right place at the right time when they asked me about something. And then, you know, we kind of had some talks, and I saw that it wasn't going to be a good fit for me to be on their board. But I love the work that they did. And so relationships are very important. So if you're able to, again, network with people, leverage who you know to help your own nonprofit, or have other people do that for you. People like me, people like Juanita, we know people because of the work we do, but we don't necessarily, you know, we can't help everybody. So what we do is we find our friends and colleagues and family members who can channel that into the nonprofits we want to help.
Dr. Rolle, and I know this question's not up here yet, but what are some questions that, you know, as you get ready to go into these nonprofits, that you should ask yourself? I know you touch bases on about the board's responsibilities, right? Being
Yes.
able to
Yeah.
Participate, make changes, invest, you know, bring your expertise and things of that nature. Always bring that passion and support the operating team and things of that nature. But what are some of the questions that are overlooked? Because let's say I'm just starting out wanting to help a nonprofit. What would be the first thing I should ask myself?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I wanted to get a little bit more into that, but I was afraid I was going to run out of time. So here are questions not only do I ask myself, but also what I ask of the nonprofit that are asking me to be on their board. So number one, I want to know, why are they asking me to be on the board? Like, what do they think that I bring to the table? Now, sometimes, and I like for people to be upfront and transparent with me. When they say things like, well, we're trying to diversify our board. Cool, no problem. So what that means is we're looking for Black people to be on the board, or we're looking for women to be on the board. And I'm not offended by that at all. And I just want to say that if you are a person of color or a female, or even someone from the LGBT community, you might expect that question now more than ever because of everything that's happened this year. But I'm not offended by that at all. So I think that's great, because there needs to be greater representation on some of these boards. However, what else can I do for this nonprofit besides bring a Black face and my female self to the table? Now, if that nonprofit had not thought about what else I could do for them besides that, I wouldn't be a good fit for them for that board. That's just me. I wouldn't be a good fit. I think I am more than a Black woman. Not that that's a bad thing, but as a nonprofit, you have to think beyond. So now I'm on the other side of the table, thinking about recruiting. When you're going to recruit a new board member or board members, you really should be looking at your mission and your strategic plan. If you do not have a strategic plan, you're pulling things out of the air. You don't know what you need to help you accomplish your plan. So that's the other thing. Now, if someone says to me, well, Dorinda, we are going to expand our board, or we're just now kind of really understanding the importance of the board's role, we think you can help guide us with that. We'd like for you to join and help us to have a board development committee. And we'd like for you to chair that committee. Cool, I can do that. If they thought about that, or if they said, you know, we're about to embark on a strategic planning journey, we'd like you to help us with that, I would probably say no. Let me tell you why. I do that as a part of my business as a consultant. That's how I make my money. I can't give away everything. But the other part of that is that once I have helped you to develop the strategic plan, what else am I going to do? So you'd have to think through, besides that, this one issue we want you to do. It doesn't take that long. I can help you do a strategic plan in a weekend, 6 months, or a whole year, depending on what it is that you're trying to do. So those are some of the factors that I think about. But to your question, Juanita, I also think about the time that I have to give to that nonprofit board. And on the other side of the table, when nonprofits are asking people to join their board, then they need to be real clear about the expectations about time, about showing up. And by time, I mean that there's usually other work to do besides showing up for that monthly board meeting. There may be committee meetings in between. There may be expectations about fundraising. Do I participate in that? And my Dorinda's thinking is, yes, you should. Every board member should have a role in fundraising. And if you're saying that, oh, well, I'm not comfortable asking people for money, or I don't know how to do that, that's a part of board development where they should say, if you're willing, we will show you, we will teach you, we won't put you out there by yourself, but we want you to understand that that is a part of the board's responsibility if you're going to join this board. So if someone is uncomfortable with that, then they maybe need to decline and say, let me be a volunteer in some other capacity. I could go on, but I'll stop.
I love the fact that you're setting up boundaries, right? That's extremely important, setting up those boundaries, because you're right. Your time is precious. Now, nobody wants to ask this question. And should you think when you're going into a nonprofit, what's in it for me? Is that a selfish way to look at it?
I don't think so. Now, the what's in it for me, again, to me, it would be the passion that you have for whatever that mission is. You should get some joy out of serving your community or serving whatever the demographic is for that organization. And by that, I mean, I'm separating community from like youth center, mentor programs, because there are other types of nonprofits like your professional association. So you might get joy out of being a part of leading that organization. Now, if what's in it for me, if you are, let's say, a business person and you think, okay, cool, here's my opportunity to do some business with this nonprofit because I'm on the board. Let me tell you that there are real strict rules with the IRS against doing that. You cannot profit from being on a nonprofit board financially, you or your family. So that is an important question about what's in it for me. Why? Another way that I would put that is, why would I do this? Why am I going to do this? And so that might help some people decide if it's worth their time.
No, and again, you're right. It's very important on how you phrase it, because with passion, drive, the demographics of the group and where you want to see that group in 5 years is extremely important. And sometimes people look at it from that perspective as being selfish, but there's two things you can't get back: money and time.
That's right.
Right? Money and time. And we see it, we hear that cliche all the time, but you do have to remember that when you're there, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Rolle, that you need to be fully invested.
Absolutely. I have nothing else to add to that. You must be fully invested in that nonprofit. Now, otherwise, you want me to tell you what happens when you're not fully invested?
Please do so.
When you're not fully invested in that nonprofit, you will find every reason to not show up. Oh, the cat got out, so I can't go to the board meeting. Or, you know what, traffic is just too heavy to get down to wherever, so I'm just going to call in. And I want to, I've been sometimes on nonprofit boards, you have other ways that you can join the board meeting besides face-to-face. And I think that's great with technology, with Zoom and being able to conference in. But even before COVID, I have served on some nonprofit boards where some board members just never show up. They call in on the conference line and we're asking, Mary, are you there? Mary, hello? Mary's not even there. I've seen that on Zoom as well. They called in, but they're gone. And so sometimes that becomes a proxy way of showing up and not being there at all. The other thing that happens is that I think people, and I've had this happen before too, you kind of get burned out when there's like nothing really happening. You feel like it's a waste of time for you. If you're not invested in what they're doing, you don't bring your best to the table. You may show up, but you're really not there at all. So those things kind of happen when you're not excited and you don't have that passion that I talked about for your nonprofit.
Now, let's flip the roles. What happens when you're coming in? What should you do when you're coming in just full of gusto and excitement and just passion, and you want to just really uplift this organization, and the organization doesn't do anything? What should you do? What are some things that you can do as a board member?
That is a powerful question. Okay, I'm going to give you the academic answer.
Yes, ma'am.
Because Dorinda would say, bye, I don't have time for this. But you shouldn't, everybody can't do that. Everybody can't just tuck and run when it's not going their way. Really, what you should do is sit down and have a heart-to-heart with the board chair and or the executive director and clarify the expectations. Expectations go two ways. I mentioned expectations in the beginning about the nonprofit, explaining to the potential board member, hey, this is what we need from you. You need to show up once a month. We need you to give this, that, and the other. But because I'm giving my time, I have expectations as well. And so you should lay out, well, I thought I was going to be doing this, that, or the other. I thought the organization did this, or share your ideas about how you think things could be different or better. So that's where I would go first is, let's wait, we might need to have a talk so that either I can adjust my expectations or decide that maybe I need to step away. This is not the right time for me. But one of the things that I didn't say about when board recruitment is going on and you're looking for new board members, I like to do something that I call it's like the courting stage. We're gonna date each other, if that can be used as an analogy, where we're not really gonna invite you on the board just right away. We're gonna invite you to have lunch with us. We're gonna sit down and talk to you. We're gonna invite you to one of the board meetings just to sit in and to kind of be a fly on the wall. We'll ask you if you would like to be a volunteer for something, maybe on one of our events. Maybe you might help us with a project. And then on the board side, I'd like to see, well, how did you perform as a volunteer? Did you do what you said you do? Did you show up? And then, because I have proven myself as being a worthy person of this nonprofit, then they invite me to be on the board. I have a couple of nonprofits in San Antonio. I'm just going to name this one, that I sit on a leadership board. That's what they call it, the leadership board for the San Antonio Lighthouse. And it used to be the Lighthouse for the Blind. It's still the same organization, but they go by the Lighthouse now. So they've got this leadership board. I think last time I checked, it was like 75 people. So I'm not special in any way, but they do have some heavy hitters on the board, but we're not the governing board. We only show up when they need us for something. And I'm right there. They have asked, they do have, that particular organization has, I think it's once a month they'll have, or they used to, because before COVID, you could come in for lunch, bring a group or one individual and get a tour of the facility so that people learn what the Lighthouse is about. So I'm in a sense a PR person or a marketing person for the Lighthouse. I sing its praises. I share information with other people about the Lighthouse. And so in that way, they can pick, they've got 75 potential people that they can pick from when they are doing board recruitment to fill an open seat. because
There you
they
go.
have seen us operate. They know us.
Now, Dr. Rolle, I have one more question. This is going to come from Mr. Kennedy. And it will be the
Okay.
last question we'll take.
Sure.
It says, how are revenues generated in a nonprofit organization that's operated differently than the community-based nonprofit?
So it's still going to be, you've got, depending on what that nonprofit does, again, your funding sources are going to be individuals. That's since I've been involved in nonprofits over 20 plus years now, the majority of the money will come from individuals. Depending on what you do, you definitely have private foundations that are required to give away a minimum of 5% of their assets every year. But you can also, and of course, you can have government contracts as well as government grants. But you can also have earned income. Earned income is a great source depending on what your mission is. So here too, I'm going to give you an example here. Let's just say you got this non-traditional, you don't have a community-based nonprofit, but it is something that does great work or it has value. You could set up some kind of revenue generating product or service. Excuse me. I have couple of nonprofits that I work with. They've created apps to do things, and they sell subscriptions to the apps. Excuse me. But if you can think of something just like it's another business that you have, that business, if it is mission related, meaning that you can clearly see that what that business is doing is related to its mission, then it's fine. All that revenue is tax-free. However, let's say you're doing some kind of business that is totally unrelated to the mission, and you're generating revenue that goes back into the nonprofit. You will have to pay a tax on that. It's called a UBIT, the unrelated business income tax. Nonprofits can do it. You can earn money, but you'll just pay a tax on it. And so some nonprofits will say, oh, I don't want to do it because we have to pay tax. And I'm like, that's really stupid, but that's me. I'd rather take the money and pay the tax than not have the money and not pay the tax. It just doesn't make sense to me. But so those are the ways that you could earn money. Also, you could do memberships depending on what you're doing. I'd be happy to give anybody a free 15-minute consultation if they have additional questions about this.
Absolutely. Dr. Rolle, it is such an honor to be able to, hear this information and see the vision that you have for our community, especially your passion for our nonprofits, because having that comprehension is extremely important. As you can see, everyone, thank you for participating with your questions. Those who are live, if you have other questions, please direct it to either the Maestro Center. And as you can see, and heard from Dr. Rolle, she'll give you a 15-minute consultation, not 15 minutes of gold. Thank you, Dr. Rolle. I appreciate your time. We really value the fact that you saw, value in us and came and presented to us.
You are so welcome. Thank you, everyone.
Absolutely. Now, I want to take an opportunity one more time is before we leave, just to inform you about Buy Local Grow SA. It is a one-stop website of resources for small business, and Buy Local is a platform that's designed for small business owners like yourself. Now, it takes about 5 to 10 minutes to register. It's in English as well as in Spanish. And if you don't want to type in, on the link, take your phone, use the camera, and there's a easy access QR code. Take full advantage. And like I said, it's a whole different way of doing business here in San Antonio. But we want to make sure that you know that the Maestro Center has your best interest at heart. And we want you to learn more about the Maestro Center. And as you can see, as Sabrina's going to put up here in front of us, to learn more about the Maestro Center, we want you to be able to call, set up a time for a tour, get to know the staff, of course, with social distances and safeties. But if you can't make it to the center, connect with us. Connect with us in some form or fashion. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. And for all of those who are professionals, connect with us on LinkedIn. We want to see how we can interact, collaborate, and leverage each other to get to that next level of success, whether it's in the nonprofit world or in the for-profit. We have podcasts. We also have YouTube. We don't want you to miss any opportunity in a way to be able to be successful, and how we can be your leverage to that next level of either sustaining and operating in this new ecosystem that we're in. Now, I don't want to forget who makes this possible. And Sabrina's going to show us again. Thank you. Thank you to our sponsors who have made this all possible. HEB, the City of San Antonio, the Economic Development Department, Wells Fargo. And as you can see, the endless numbers of supporters who believe in our mission to provide resources for the small business community. But it's not over. Yes, we presented it in English, but we're also going to present it in Spanish. Give us a few minutes, 2 max, as we get ready to transition into the Spanish version.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Hola a todos y bienvenidos al seminario de web de este miércoles. Hoy vamos a ver y escuchar la manera como ejecutar una organización sin fines de lucros exitosos. Y antes que comienzo, quiero presentar a la señora que va a presentar la visión de poder apoyar esas organizaciones. Pero antes de comenzar, se va a presentar la información sobre Buy Local, Grow SA. Sabrina, por favor, si pones la información. Gracias a todos. Otra vez la información sobre Buy Local, Grow SA es un sitio de web de recursos para pequeñas empresas. Buy Local es una plataforma destinada para dueños de negocios como ustedes, ¿verdad? A través del sitio web pueden accesar a recursos gratis y también pueden presentar, también diseñar oportunidades de adecuaciones hasta la promoción de su negocio y ayudar la visibilidad absolutamente gratis. Tenemos algunas mejores características nuevas, como la posibilidad de publicar promociones comerciales por su perfil. Aquí si tienen realizando una venta o presentando un nuevo producto, pueden usar Buy Local como otra vía para anunciar su servicio o producto. También agregamos oportunidades de adecuación donde pueden guardar las que les interesen y junto con las posibilidades de publicar sus propias oportunidades de contratos. Solamente le toma como 5 minutos, al máximo 15 para registrarse, pero cuando reciben la prueba pueden desbloquear otra manera de poder formar y hacer negocio aquí en San Antonio. Antes que avanzamos, a quien queremos darles gracias, Sabrina, porque esto no puede ser posible sin el apoyo de nuestros patrocinadores, que es posible porque es HEB, la ciudad de San Antonio, el Departamento de Desarrollo y Wells Fargo. Para también a todos los que nos siguen apoyando con la misión de promocionar recursos para nuestras pequeñas empresas. Pero para poder avanzar, aquí no están aquí para escucharme, que soy Juanita con Tree Shaker Podcast, pero aquí vamos a anunciar la señora y doctora Dorinda Rolle. Ella es la fundadora y CEO de Rolle and Associates LLC. Ella ha ocupado cargos de los ámbitos académicos, empresariales, gubernamentales y sin fines de lucros. También, como les dije, es la fundadora y CEO de Rolle and Associates LLC. Es una firma estrategia de consultoría y capacitación de liderazgo. Su junto de habilidades incluyen gestión sin fines de lucros, desarrollo de liderazgo, coaching ejecutivos y de transición, planificación, estrategias, desarrollo de juntas, facilitación de grupos y gestión de cambio. Es una experta de diversidad, ética e inclusión y ha sido profesora adjunta del programa de zoológico, industria y organización de la Universidad de St. Mary's y el programa de estudios afroamericanos de la Universidad de Texas aquí en San Antonio, en UTSA. Actualmente enseña y consulta sobre diversidad, equidad e inclusión para varias de las organizaciones, incluyendo el programa de educación ejecutivo en el Centro de Excelencia Profesional de UTSA y CPE. También es una actora de martires para el movimiento Cuerpos Negros, Derechos Civiles y hashtag Black Lives Matter, publicados en 2020. Y como siempre, sentimos bien honrados para poder tener doctora Rolle, puede presentar su visión sobre esas organizaciones. Bienvenida, doctora Rolle. Pero también vamos a tener a Samantha, que va a traducir la información de en inglés en español para poder apoyar a todos que están presentados hoy.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone. It is so good to be here with you. We are going to be talking about how to run a successful nonprofit organization. And I want to tell you just a little bit about the objectives of the webinar.
Dr. Rolle, give me just a moment. Is Samantha?
Okay.
Sí, I'm here.
Okay.
All right.
Lista y vamos a comenzar.
Bueno, aquí estamos empezando con la presentación de cómo ejecutar una organización sin fines de lucro exitosa.
Okay. And so the webinar objectives.
Próxima.
So go to the webinar. Yes. The objectives of the webinar are to give you a brief overview of some of the key elements to run a successful nonprofit in today's reality.
El objetivo de este seminario es darle una breve visión general de algunos de los requisitos clave para ejecutar una organización sin fines de lucro exitosa en la realidad del día de hoy.
And so I want to point out that we're talking about today's reality, not just in terms of what's happened because of COVID, but the nonprofit environment changes all the time. It could be based on economic factors that you don't have any control over, political factors that we don't have any control over, and also changes in your own community.
El gran objetivo es enseñar cómo es hoy en día organizar una organización sin fines de lucro, no tan solo por los momentos del COVID, de la pandemia que estamos ocurriendo, pero las organizaciones sin fines de lucro cambian día a día. Esto es para el futuro o para el presente.
Next slide. So successful nonprofits are focused on their mission. And to help you understand this, your mission should, first of all, be up to date, your mission statement.
Las organizaciones sin fines de lucro son exitosas si se centran en su misión. Para ayudarle con esto, su declaración de su misión debe de estar actualizada y presente.
So your mission statement, first of all, it should drive every decision that you make in your nonprofit. You should be able to ask one simple question about your mission. It's like, when you're making decisions, will this decision enhance or hurt our mission?
La misión de la organización debería de impulsar la toma de decisiones. Cada decisión debe de ser evaluada y debe de ser llevada con su misión. Usted debe de ser capaz de hacerse esa pregunta. ¿Esta decisión mejorará o perjudicará mi misión?
So the mission is key to funding your nonprofit. Your mission will help you in determining how to fund your nonprofit, and your mission is your guide to where you will seek funding.
También la misión es clave para financiar la organización sin fines de lucro. Su misión le ayudará a determinar cómo financiar su organización. Además, la misión guiará dónde busca los fondos y también te dirá si debes aceptar cualquier dinero de ciertas fuentes.
And it will
Recuerda,
also, I'm sorry.
recuerda, no todo dinero es buen dinero.
And your mission will also tell you if you should accept money from certain sources, because not all money is good money.
Recuerda, no todo dinero es buen dinero. Tu misión va a dejarte saber de dónde aceptar fondos.
Your mission will also determine what programs and services will be offered. And sometimes, well, I don't see this very much anymore, you may be offered funding to do something outside of your mission. Then the question becomes, should we take this money? And that's not always an easy answer.
La misión también determinará qué programas y qué servicios se ofrecerán. A veces, aunque ya no se ve muy a menudo, pero se le puede ofrecer fondos para hacer algo que está fuera de su misión. Entonces, la pregunta sería, ¿debe usted tomar ese dinero? La pregunta no siempre va a ser fácil.
So your mission is your friend because it will help to keep you on the straight and narrow. But more importantly, it tells others about your nonprofit.
La misión se convierte en tu amiga. Te mantendrá en la marcha y enfocada por lo más importante. También va a decir sobre tu organización y acerca de ti en esa organización. Próximo.
So successful nonprofits have engaged board of directors.
Tu organización sin fines de lucro siempre va a tener una junta directiva comprometida.
So when board members are truly engaged, they understand the importance of their role and they show up. They understand.
Sorry,
Go.
go ahead. I'll finish. I'll let you finish. I'm sorry.
Okay. Yeah, I'll just kind of read the whole bullet and then that way I'll stop. But they know and understand that they are responsible for governing the organization, meaning they hold more responsibility than a hired executive director. They don't miss board meetings because they know that their presence is important.
Cuando los miembros de su junta están realmente comprometidos, entienden la importancia de su papel y se presentan. Saben y entienden que son responsables de gobernar la organización, lo que significa que tienen más responsabilidad que el director ejecutivo contratado. En otras palabras, no se pierden las reuniones de la junta ya que saben que su presencia es importante.
So they give their time, talent, and treasure. So when we talk about time, that relates to showing up for board meetings, serving on communities, and being active in the community on behalf of the organization. So not only do they bring their talent and expertise to the organization, but they utilize their network on behalf of the nonprofit. They reach out to others who may be of value to the mission of the organization. And that might also include potential funders. When we talk about treasure, we're really talking about money. Board members should make a personal financial contribution to the nonprofit. There is an old saying about board members giving, and it goes like this: give, get, or get off. Give means you write a check or however you want to get money to that nonprofit. It also means, and then get means if you cannot give your own money, then you get money from others, maybe your company, or you might sell so many tickets to the gala or golf tournament. And get off means if you can't give your own money and you can't get it from a company or from other people, then you need to get off the board to make room for people who can. Now, I know that that sounds harsh, but if there are good board members, but they can't give, I know somebody's asking that question, There are always exceptions to that statement about getting off, but a lot of foundations will ask what percentage of your board members have given their own money to the organization, or how have they participated in fundraising? And you should be able to answer that question.
Los miembros de su junta dan tiempo, talento y valor. El tiempo se refiere a presentarse a las reuniones de la junta, servir en comités y ser activo en la comunidad en nombre de la organización. No solo aportan su talento y experiencia a la organización, sino que utilizan sus contactos en nombre de la organización. Llegan a personas que pueden ser de valor para la misión de la organización. Se podrían incluir posibles financiadores, personas para servir en comités y voluntarios potenciales. Al hablar del valor, no solamente estamos hablando del dinero. Los miembros de la Junta deben hacer una contribución personal y financiera a la organización sin fines de lucro. Hay un viejo dicho sobre los miembros de la Junta y va así: da, obtén o quítate. Al dar, significa que tú escribes un cheque o cualquier método de pago que usted use hoy en día a su compañía. Obtener significa que obtienes dinero de otros o tal vez de tu misma compañía. Por ejemplo, vendes algunas entradas para una gala o algún torneo de golf. Y quítate significa que si no puedes hacer los otros dos, dejas la organización para hacer espacio a alguien que pueda. Sé que hay alguien allá afuera diciendo, eso es un poco duro. O, bueno, pero ¿por qué pensar así de un miembro de la Junta si no puede dar? Siempre hay excepciones a mi declaración, pero puedo decirle que un montón de fundaciones se preguntará qué porcentaje de los miembros de su Junta dan a la organización que son tan apasionados.
So engaged board members are also passionate about the mission, and they also look for ways to attract potential board members. And they also understand the duty of every board member is to help identify potential board members.
Los miembros de tu junta son apasionados por la misión de una manera que atrae a miembros potenciales para la junta y entienden que es el deber de cada miembro de la junta identificar los posibles miembros en un futuro.
And board members operate as a team by speaking with one voice.
Los miembros operan en un equipo. Las juntas deben de funcionar en equipo y hablar como una sola voz.
One of the best ways to destroy a nonprofit from within is to have board members who are in conflict with one another.
Una de las mejores maneras de destruir una organización sin fines de lucro desde adentro es tener miembros de la junta que se preocupan y hay un conflicto entre sí.
Go to the next slide.
Próximo.
So successful boards also seek continuous improvement. First, with their board development.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, go.
Participar con éxito en la mejora continua mediante. Desarrolla una junta. ¿Qué es el desarrollo de la junta y qué debería de importarte?
So board development has several components, but it also helps your board to understand what they should be doing. It helps them to understand their roles and their responsibility. When we do board development, sometimes you bring in people who are able to speak to the board about industry information, about social and economic factors that could affect the nonprofit. For example, those nonprofits that had a crisis management plan in place before March of this year were not forced to close their operations because of COVID. They were able to continue working because they had already role-played a scenario where they asked and answered the questions about what if? What if we can't open the office? How will we service our clients? How will we survive if donations stop for 12 months? Because they were developed as a board, they were actually able to answer those questions.
El desarrollo de la Junta es ayudar a entender lo que deberían estar haciendo. Desarrolle su Junta proporcionando educación sobre sus funciones y responsabilidades, información de la industria y factores sociales y económicos que pueden afectar a la organización sin fines de lucro. Por ejemplo, aquellas organizaciones sin fines de lucro que tenían un buen plan para el manejo de crisis en función antes de marzo de este año, no se vieron obligadas a cerrar sus operaciones debido al COVID. ¿Por qué? Porque con el plan de manejo de crisis ya se había desempeñado un papel en el que se preguntaron y se respondieron a las preguntas de qué pasaría si. ¿Qué pasaría si no podemos abrir la oficina? ¿Qué pasaría si no se pueden hablar con nuestros clientes? ¿Cómo sobreviviremos las donaciones? Sin las donaciones en los próximos 12 meses. El manejo de crisis no solo se trata de las relaciones públicas.
So also, boards should do a board assessment, which is a tool that is designed to provide information and insight into your board's governance and performance.
Cada junta debe llevar a cabo una evaluación de sí misma de cada 2 a 3 años. Una evaluación de la junta y organización es una herramienta diseñada para proporcionar información sobre el desempeño y el manejo de su junta de administración.
So one of the questions I like to ask on a board assessment to board members is, could you be doing more for this board than you have been asked to do? And a lot of times people will say yes. But I also ask the question of, would you like to leave the board before your term is over? And sometimes people say yes as well. And these are legitimate questions, and people should not be made to feel shameful about their answer. You should be happy to release a board member who does not want to be on the board anymore, because sometimes people's priorities change, and so we should let them go.
Una de las preguntas que me gusta hacer en una evaluación de la junta es, ¿podrías estar haciendo más para contribuir a la organización de lo que se te ha pedido hacer? Te sorprendería cuánta gente dice sí, pero de la misma manera, cuando les pregunto, ¿les gustaría dejar la junta antes de que se termine su mandato? Por lo general, hay al menos una que otra persona que diría que sí. Es una pregunta legítima y no se debe hacer que la gente se sienta avergonzada por su respuesta. Usted debe estar feliz de que lanzó una junta que ya no quiere estar ahí. La vida y las prioridades de las personas cambian. Proporcione una manera de hacerles sentir que todavía son partes de la junta sin ocupar una posición valiosa.
And successful boards also have a process for cultivating potential board members. And I like to call this the dating phase, where the nonprofit and the potential board member get to know each other before the engagement. And that means they spend time with each other.
También en un proceso de cultivar posibles miembros de la junta. Me encanta llamarlo como la fase de citas, donde solo se conocen antes del compromiso. Eso significa que pasamos algún tiempo juntos, invitamos al posible miembro de la junta a eventos, les dejamos ver cómo se opera, los llevamos a almorzar y les damos un recorrido por todas nuestras instalaciones cuando el COVID claramente haya terminado.
So another tool for continuous improvement is an organizational assessment that provides insight about every aspect of your nonprofit, especially the strengths, weaknesses, to help you understand where your opportunities and threats may lie.
Una evaluación organizativa proporcionará información sobre todos los aspectos de su organización sin fines de lucro, especialmente las fortalezas y debilidades para ayudarle a entender dónde pueden estar esas oportunidades y en dónde están sus amenazas.
Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats is your SWOT, and it is the cornerstone of a strategic plan.
Fuerzas, debilidades, oportunidades, todos estos se llaman su SWOT. Y es la piedra angular donde usted debe de hacer un plan estratégico. Próximo.
Next slide. Successful nonprofits are agile. So an agile nonprofit is quick in responding to changes in the environment, and its staff is able to work on tasks that maximize their skills and expertise, meaning they don't wait for the worst thing to happen before they make a change. They actually invite change because it is anticipated, and the staff is not tied to titles. They can work in a different area besides the one that is assigned to them. Everybody's ideas are valuable and welcome. It doesn't matter the position.
Las organizaciones sin fines de lucro exitosas son ágiles. Una organización sin fines de lucro es ágil. Una organización sin fines de lucro ágil es rápida en responder a los cambios en el entorno y su personal es capaz de trabajar en tareas que maximizan sus habilidades y experiencia. Esas organizaciones no esperan a que pase lo peor antes de cambiar, sino siempre previenen un cambio. El personal tampoco está vinculado a los títulos, ya que no es importante, todo el mundo es igual. Las ideas también de todos es valiosas y también son bienvenidas. Y esto también no importa de quién, todos somos por iguales. Próximo.
So those nonprofits that operate with an agile mindset were better prepared for COVID than those without it.
Esas organizaciones que fueron ágiles con su proceso, con sus fines de lucros y sus crisis, pudieron sobrevivir y tuvieron un plan para la época del COVID.
Successful nonprofits have diverse funding sources, meaning that no nonprofit should exist off of one funding source. So,
Una organización.
go.
Una organización sin fines de lucro exitosa tiene diversas fuentes de financiamiento. Esto quiere decir que ninguna organización sin fines de lucro debe existir con solamente una fuente de financiamiento.
So it is very common for a startup nonprofit to have only one funding source, but they must quickly change that.
Las organizaciones sin fines de lucro no deben de tener una sola fuente de financiamiento y deben de cambiarla inmediatamente.
We'll go to the next slide. Successful nonprofits have an online presence. And the first thing they must have is a website. At a minimum, a website or a web page should state your name, your logo, and mission statement, and have a donate button.
Una organización sin fines de lucro exitosas debe tener presencia en línea. Todas las organizaciones de hoy en día son más exitosas ya que tienen una presencia en línea. Como mínimo, usted debe tener un sitio web o una página web que indique su nombre, un logotipo, y una declaración de su misión y, si es posible, un botón de donación.
If there is no website, then you can easily put up a Facebook page until you are able to secure a professional website.
Si no hay sitio web, entonces usted puede fácilmente poner una página de Facebook hasta que sea capaz de asegurar un sitio web profesional.
Depending on the demographic of your nonprofit, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok may be beneficial for you.
Dependiendo de la demografía de su organización, Instagram, YouTube y TikTok también pueden ser beneficiosos para usted.
You must consider what you are trying to do with these sites. TikTok may not bring donations. However, if you are an organization trying to stop the spread of HIV, for example, those sites might be perfect to inform a young demographic about free testing and education.
Debe considerar cuál es su objetivo al unirse a estas plataformas. Por ejemplo, TikTok no puede traer donaciones. Sin embargo, si usted es una organización que está tratando de detener la propagación del VIH, por ejemplo, este sitio puede ser perfecto para informar a un grupo demográfico más joven sobre las pruebas gratuitas y más información sobre el virus. Próximo.
Next slide. So partners and collaborators, you need them. Don't fall victim to the Lone Ranger syndrome.
No seas víctima del síndrome del llanero solitario. Necesitas a personas en tu organización. A estos son socios y o colaboradores.
The Lone Ranger syndrome is the belief that we need to do everything ourselves. We don't need anybody else, because we believe that if we do everything ourselves, it will get done better, quicker, faster. But the reality is every Lone Ranger needs a Tonto.
El síndrome del llanero solitario es la creencia de que tenemos que hacer todo nosotros mismos. No necesitamos a nadie más. Si hacemos todo nosotros, se hará mejor, más rápido, y la realidad es que cada llanero solitario necesita un tonto.
So every nonprofit should have collaborators and partners for every program or service it offers.
Cada organización sin fines de lucro debe tener socios o colaboradores para cada programa que ofrezca.
Next slide. So the value of partners and collaborators. One, they bring resources you don't have.
El valor de socios y colaboradores. Empezando, que traen recursos que usted no tenga.
Resources could be money, volunteers, office space, equipment.
Estos recursos pueden ser dinero, espacio de oficina y herramientas para su organización.
They also give you leverage, increase your knowledge, give you access to expertise that you may not have, and it brings instant credibility and can close gaps.
También le pueden dar ventaja, un aumento a sus conocimientos. También estos socios les darán acceso a mucha experiencia que traiga credibilidad instantánea y también pueden cerrar brechas.
So, for example, of leverage, if you have a funder who gives you $5,000, you can use that $5,000 to get another $5,000 from a different funder, because they will see that you have credibility with another credible funder.
Al hablar de ventajas, se refiere a que si algún si algún donante le da $5,000, usted puede conseguir otros $5,000 usando los iniciales. Eso le deja enseñar al próximo donador que usted tiene credibilidad con donantes y socios o colaboradores.
Another thing that a partnership or collaboration can do is to bring expertise into your organization that you may not have, like marketing expertise.
Otro beneficio de tener socios y o colaboradores es que le pueden traer conocimientos u experiencias que usted no tiene. Por ejemplo, algún método de mercadeo, algún conocimiento sobre esos temas que usted no tenga al momento.
And then finally, go to the next slide. The leader self-care. Nonprofit leaders are subject to being overworked and underpaid, but they must take time to take care of themselves. This is one thing that an engaged board of directors will do, is to make sure the executive director is taken care of with adequate time off, time to unplug, to recharge.
El cuidado personal de un líder. Los líderes sin fines de lucro están sujetos a un exceso de trabajo y pueden estar mal pagados. Debe de tomarse tiempo para cuidarse. Esto es un consejo para un administrador comprometido y es de asegurarse que el director ejecutivo sea atendido con el tiempo libre y adecuado. Tómense tiempo para desconectar.
So those were just some of the things that successful nonprofits do. And now I want to talk about a few resources, nonprofit resources. You go to the next slide.
Estas son unos recursos e información que organizaciones sin fines de lucro tienen y pueden proveer. Ahora les vamos a hablar de recursos de unas organizaciones sin fines de lucro.
The first one is Charity Navigator, has several lists of the best nonprofits in several categories that you may want to learn about.
La primera es Charity Navigator. Tiene varias listas de las mejores organizaciones sin fines de lucro en varias categorías sobre la que es posible que desee obtener información.
GuideStar is also a good source to find out about what other nonprofits are doing. You should also set up a free profile for your nonprofit on this site.
GuideStar también es una buena fuente para averiguar qué están haciendo otras organizaciones sin fines de lucro. Además, debe de configurar un perfil gratuito para su organización sin fines de lucro en este sitio.
Also, Board Source is a nonprofit that focuses on the work of nonprofit boards, and it provides a lot of free sources as well. Let me finish. And the sample board assessment tool that I mentioned, that's what the link goes to. It might give you some ideas about how to evaluate your board.
Board Source es una organización sin fines de lucro que se centra en el trabajo de las juntas directivas sin fines de lucro y proporciona una gran cantidad de recursos. Ahí hay una muestra de la herramienta de evaluación que quiero que ustedes miren. Puede darte algunas ideas sobre cómo puedes evaluar tu organización.
And then there is Donor Box, provides a blog with some good information for nonprofits. They have a list of successful characteristics of nonprofits that you might be interested in there.
Donor Box proporciona un blog con buena información de organizaciones sin fines de lucro. También provee una lista de características que organizaciones exitosas tienen hoy en día.
And then the final one is not on the list, is TechSoup.org. They will put that in the text box for you. You can get discounted software, some Microsoft Office software for as little as $39. They have refurbished equipment for you. They have things, oh, I might be talking too much, but anyway, go ahead. Go ahead, Samantha. I forgot.
No se preocupe. TechSoup es una página donde puede conseguir a buen precio programas online para su organización. A tan poco como $39 puede conseguir muchos programas para empezar su organización.
And I can take questions now if there were any questions that people had, or Juanita, you may have some questions for me.
Yes, we had some in English and I'd love to be able to bring them back in Spanish.
Okay.
The first one was, ¿qué es el beneficio? ¿Qué es organización beneficio? And it is
What is-
benefit organization. What is benefit
Yes. Oh.
organization?
Yes, yes. So a benefit organization, according to the IRS, is an organization that is set up to raise funds or somehow support another 501c3 nonprofit.
Una organización de beneficios, según el IRS, es una organización sin fines de lucro bajo esos nombres y proveídos por el IRS.
So an example is you might see groups that they might be like Friends of the San Antonio Public Library. That's a benefit group. They exist to raise money that goes to benefit the public library. That's all they do. That's an example.
Un ejemplo sobre una de estas organizaciones es el San Antonio Public Library, la Biblioteca Pública de San Antonio. Ellos proveen información y algunas donaciones a esta organización.
Gracias, Dr. Rolle. Otra pregunta, another question is, what do you think of Greatnonprofits.org? ¿Qué piensas sobre el sitio Greatnonprofits.org?
So Greatnonprofits.org is a good website, as there are many, many more as well. But yes, I'm not real familiar with it. I know I have been to that site. They should have some good resources for you there. I like to look in different places to see, are people saying the same thing or is there something different that someone is saying? But most of the sites say pretty much the same thing.
Nonprofits.org es un buen sitio web. No estoy muy familiarizada con él, pero todos básicamente dicen lo mismo. También me gusta ver en otros sitios web para confirmar cualquier información que pueda leer.
Thank you. How are revenue-generating nonprofit organizations operated differently than community-based nonprofit? So, ¿cómo? La pregunta en español, ¿cómo?
Can you read it in English again so I can see if I can translate?
Yes. How are revenue-generated nonprofit organizations operated different than community-based nonprofits? The only question I don't know what revenue generating. ¿Cómo?
¿Cómo organizaciones sin fines de lucro están operadas bajo el dinero traído diferente de las organizaciones de comunidades?
Yes, so for nonprofits that are not community-based, the way that they fundraise is not too terribly different, but they may have some other options. There may be some things that don't work for them. So for example, if there is a nonprofit that does not have operations necessarily in a community, they could have a revenue generating business that supports the nonprofit. Now, if they're going to do that, then they have to think about, remember in the beginning, I talked about the mission, how important that is. So if the revenue generating business is mission related, meaning that you can demonstrate that this enhances our nonprofit mission, they can have that business and use the funds to support that nonprofit. Now, if they've thought of another business idea that is not business related, let's just say they open some kind of a coffee shop and they sell coffee and sandwiches or donuts and they make lots of money, but it is in no way related to their mission. They can do that, but they will pay what's called a UBIT. The UBIT is the unrelated business income tax. And I don't want to get too detailed. I don't want you to have to try to translate too much, but it's, you can do that. So some businesses that are not community-based, they might have memberships that people pay for. They need to do more in terms of partnerships, sponsorships, and collaborations to fund their operations.
Para las organizaciones sin fines de lucro que son bajo una comunidad, no son tan diferentes. Pueden traer una manera de generar dinero, al igual que la de sin fines de lucro. Lo único que si esta manera de traer el dinero es base a su misión, pueden usar las donaciones que han recibido para la misma. Si no es con la misión, pueden estar en riesgo de pagar el UBIT, el Unrelated Business Income Tax. Esta es, por ejemplo, si esa organización vende membresías, tiene algunos eventos que son separados de la misión. Básicamente puede ser igual, lo único que les diferencia es la parte si esas donaciones o ese dinero es o en contra de su misión.
Gracias, Samantha. Thank you, Dr. Royal. Una pregunta que cuando uno está buscando a poder apoyar un programa, una organización, ¿qué es la pregunta que uno debe de hacer a uno mismo para asegurar que estás ahí para el beneficio? When a person is looking, Dr. Royal, to serve on a nonprofit, what is a question that you should ask yourself to ensure that you're a benefit to that organization?
Absolutely. So yes, questions that you should ask yourself before serving on a nonprofit board is, what value do I bring to this board? And then I would go back and ask them, what did they see the value that I would bring to the board? Let them tell you what they would like for you to contribute to that board. And if they haven't thought through why they're asking you to be on the board, then you might consider that maybe you don't want to be on that board, because they really need to think that through. The other thing is, I would be asking, what are the expectations? Can I meet the expectations of what they have for the board? If they're meeting, 20 hours a month, can I do that? Can I realistically contribute that? Do I have to show up in person to do that? Or can some of the meetings be over Zoom once COVID is over? Some of the meetings might be on Zoom or through conference calls, or do I need to be there? I want to know, am I required to contribute my financial funds to the organization, and how much? Do they have a set amount, or do I just give like any other person off the street might give?
Cuando uno quiere apoyar a una organización, debe de hacerse estas preguntas. ¿Qué valor traigo a esta organización? Y hazte la pregunta a ellos, ¿en dónde ven mi valor al contribuir? Si ellos no contestar o se tardan bastante en hacerte una respuesta, hazte otra vez esta pregunta. Claramente no se lo han preguntado al igual que tú. También Otra pregunta que te debes hacer es, ¿puedes mantener el trabajo de la organización? Al esto es decir, ¿puedes mantener esas horas que son requeridas? ¿Necesitas estar en persona o cuando una vez se acabe el COVID puede ser virtual? Son esas cosas que te debes de preguntar antes de unirte a cualquier organización.
Gracias, doctora Rolle. And thank you so much. Hay otra pregunta? Por favor, toma la oportunidad hacerles preguntas a la doctora Rolle, porque aquí está presentando su visión y la manera que puede uno apoyar este tipo de organizaciones.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to be a part of this webinar, and thank you all for joining in. I do want to let you know that if you have additional questions that I did not cover or that you would like a little bit more information on, I'd be happy to give you a free 15-minute consultation to talk about that.
Gracias a todos por la oportunidad y por dejarme hablar sobre mi experiencia con las organizaciones. Si alguien necesita alguna duda o pregunta de las que nos hablaron en el seminario, estoy más que dispuesta a ofrecer un tiempo de 15 minutos gratuito para cualquier duda o pregunta que se le haya ocurrido en o después de este seminario.
They should reach out to me via email.
También me puedes contactar al email que se ve en pantalla.
Bueno, gracias, doctora Rolle. Siempre es un honor a poder escucharla y ver que tiene a presentar su visión para poder apoyar estos tipos de organizaciones. En este momento, como dijo la doctora Rolle, si tienen una pregunta, les ofrece 15 minutos de consultar y manden un correo electrónico, como dijo la señorita Samantha Fernández. Otra vez, gracias, doctora Rolle, y gracias, Samantha Fernández, por para poder presentar y traducir la información presentada en inglés a español. En este momento, les quiero tomar otra oportunidad a poderles informarles otra vez sobre Buy Local Grow SA. Les quiero dar otra oportunidad que se pueden registrar porque este sitio web es de recursos para pequeñas empresas. Solamente le tomo como 15, a lo máximo 15 minutos para poder registrarse, pero cuando reciben la prueba pueden desbloquear una nueva manera o forma de hacer negocio en San Antonio. El sitio web no nomás está en inglés, pero también está en español. Por si una razón u otra no quieren ir a inscribirse, pero pueden usar su teléfono, la cámara y usar el QR code para que lo manden directo al sitio web. Pero no nomás queremos para que aprovechen la oportunidad, también queremos que aprendan sobre el Maestro Center. Así, si miran ahorita, está el número presentado para que puedan hacer una cita, a informarse, hacer una cita para poder ir a demostrar cómo está el edificio. Tenemos oficinas donde pueden utilizar, pero también conecten con nosotros sobre Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, y todos son profesionales. Conecten con nosotros sobre LinkedIn también. Tenemos YouTube porque tenemos demostraciones y podcasts donde siguen a hacer educación y también informarse sobre lo que ya vamos presentados aquí en el Maestro Center. Pero la otra cosa también, todo esto es posible porque tenemos el apoyo de nuestros patrocinadores. Gracias a nuestros patrocinadores que nos ayudan a hacer todo esto posible. ¿Verdad, Sabrina? Y los que los hacen hacer posible es H-E-B, la ciudad de San Antonio, el Departamento de Desarrollo Económico y Wells Fargo. Y como notan ahí al final, todos los que nos siguen soportando como para poder asegurar que estamos presentando recursos para nuestras pequeñas empresas. Como siempre, aquí estamos presentando el semanario de web cada miércoles y los vemos el próximo. Gracias a todos.